Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to the Brand Bite podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Myers, and I'm very, very excited to be welcoming our guest today, Lucy Bedewi. So Lucy is the copywriter and messaging strategist behind the copywriting studio, My Right Hand Woman, spelled W-R-I-T-E, which is very clever, and I love it. Her words give women founders what they need to stand out and scale into their stretchiest goals. With a focus on conversational communication, razor sharp clarity on differentiators, and a consistent brand voice, she has been the secret wordy weapon behind global companies, fast growth startups, world famous bakeries, seven-figure coaches, and brands breaking molds. Now, I met Lucy through a summit that we were both speaking at and was so freaking excited when she said she wanted to come on the show. But without further ado, let's just hand those reins right over to Lucy. So tell us, how did you get into entrepreneurship in the first place?
Thank you. Yeah, so much for that intro. And I got into entrepreneurship. It's one of those things where I think I was always meant to be an entrepreneur, but of course you try and talk yourself out of it, especially when you're just out of college and you're thinking, there's no way I'm going to start my life starting a business and have a completely blank resume. So I decided to do the thing where I get a normal job. It was remote, it was in the pandemic, and I got fired from that job 90 days. And I was there on my mom's couch, just like looking at my mom, and I'm like, I don't think I can ever work for someone ever again. And she's a psychologist. She runs her own practice, and she was like, yeah, you definitely can. So with my mom's blessing, if you will, my dad was also really chill with it. They were like, yeah, just try it. You know, we're all like at home because of some super virus. So this is the time to like do something crazy and fall on your face. I worked 18-hour days in my childhood bedroom, grinding, trying to become a copywriter. I had first seen the word in a Facebook group and I was like, I love to write. I can do that. So I was working so hard trying to find clients in Facebook groups. That's when like Facebook groups were the thing. And then Clubhouse happened and I was trying to get clients through Clubhouse. That's a throwback. And then from going from being a freelancer who was getting clients simply with a Google Doc portfolio that people were resonating with, I started to establish my brand and my space. And that's where I really started to niche into irreverent copy for brands that want to be cool. And I love working with women because so many women are afraid to put their whole personality into their brand messaging. And nothing lights me up more than watching a sassy woman also be sassy on paper.
Yeah, so oh my gosh, I love that you bring this up because I feel like it was something that I really struggled with for a long time. Like I clearly have a lot of attitude and it is definitely dialed down sometimes, on these videos and whatnot. But like I remember some of the first things that I wrote for my brand where I was like, this cannot be any more fucking bland. What is currently here? And I feel like you're so right that we almost need permission, right? To show up and be, I'm gonna use the word spicy and, have that sass, like you said. And so thinking about like your own personality, is this something that you've kind of always had and it's just bled over into the work that you do and now you help other people express that as well? Or do you feel like that personality that is so visible in your brand is something that you've developed over time?
I think I developed it over time. It's one of those things where I can point to very specific incidents in my childhood where I was like, oh, I'm about to be people's biggest problems. But then, I think we can all relate, like going through school, going through puberty, whatever it is. And we're told, like, I'm a woman with ADHD. I was diagnosed later in life. And I was told, like, sit down, read your book, get straight A's. And like, I did all those things. I worked so hard in school. I was a student athlete. And I definitely had this like good girl people pleaser because I was like, that's what the world rewards. So I think I temporarily lost it. And then when I got to college and when I started to pursue entrepreneurship, and I would just, even though I didn't know I was going to fully plunge at age 21, I knew it was going to be in my path. I think I had a journal entry that was like, by 25, I want to be writing my own business or running my own business. So I think as I moved into that space and as I left like the school system and started to explore what it is I actually like, I'm like, wait, I can wear chokers and get on strategy calls and write for women making $1 million. Like I can do that. There's no rules. It's the Wild West out here. And then I started to move back into that personality that I think I always had, but I thought had to be toned down in a professional setting.
I'm glad you bring up the word professional because I think that that is something that holds a lot of people back. And I see this a lot with my branding clients too, where I have to tell them professional does not necessarily mean corporate. Like
Totally.
it means, right? Like so many different things. And so I'd love to hear how you have kind of embraced your personality and you help your clients embrace their personalities while still having that like professional edge to it. And again, folks, professional doesn't mean corporate.
It's so true. I think when people say professional to me, when they're like, I don't want the copy to not be professional, what I'm hearing them say is, I don't want people to lose respect for me. And I think we need to redefine what it means to respect someone. Oftentimes, okay, yeah, if you're going for like white collar men that are looking for like a very specific type of person to hire, maybe we shouldn't drop that F bomb. But it's asking yourself, who do you actually want to attract? Because that person, it might respect you even more if you show up, like showing off your tattoo or using the words that you actually say or just letting your sense of humor just break free because they're like, wow, that person is so expressed. Of course, I want to hire them to design my brand. Or, of course, I want to hire them to come and be my event planner because I actually want to be friends with them. So it's asking yourself who you want to work with and what do they actually want to see. But then again, also, how can you be embodied in your business? I think if we're trying to be something we're not, that is the worst thing we can do, especially if we have a personal brand.
Yeah, well, you bring up such a valid point, and it's something that I also, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation. It's something that I
Such
also
a
have to
juicy
tell people,
one.
right? Right. But I'm like, who are you trying to attract? And how do they want to be spoken to? I bring this up all the time. And actually, this is what I spoke about at the summit that we were speaking at together, is this idea of like, you really want to think about it as like a crush or someone that you're wanting to date. Like, what are you going to do to try to attract them, to get their attention, to get them to want to hang out with you? And I love that you're doing like the same thing with copy and like the words that you use. Because, like, guys, this is how we communicate. Like I do visual communication, you do like written and verbal communication, and all of them are huge elements of a brand. So, what are some things as you're maybe thinking about some of your current clients that you really encourage them to think about and explore when they're, trying to figure out how to attract that like crush that's their ideal client?
I love that you brought up the idea of having strong messaging, whether visual or verbal, is akin to having a crush. Because one thing I like to tell my clients is, especially because so many of them come to me with a visual brand already done, and it's good. Like it's a good visual brand. They hired a professional. And they're like, well, I already did my visual brand. Like, is the copy going to matter that much? And I'm just like, okay, well, let's play. And let's say you go to a bar or wherever you go to meet people and you see someone and they're just creme de la creme. Think about your type that. And then you go up to them and you talk to them and they are so dumb. And they're maybe mean. Like, let's go beyond dumb. Dumb we can handle. They're mean. They're so mean. And you're just like, wow, I'm like instantly turned off. So the words or the communication behind the first impression, which is your copy, is the difference between you being like, this is my future husband, or you being like, save me to your friend across the bar. So when I'm talking to my clients about this, I mean, that speaks to the importance of copy and messaging. But when it comes actually to it, I do want to stay in this analogy, if you will, because we all have different types. Some of us like the shy guy, some of us like the wild boy, it's like whatever. So you don't have to be any one thing. You don't have to pretend to be this like perfect brand voice or have this perfect copy, but whatever you are, do it consistently and do it well and like really own your archetype.
Yeah, well, I love that you bring up the bar scenario, right? Because I do the exact same thing, but talking about the first impression, right? Where you're like, okay,
Right.
like, guys, we got to have the substance. We got to have the substance to show up and have a conversation. And I'm like, but yes, you also got to get them to look at you.
Yeah.
Okay. Like you can
Initial
have,
eyeballs.
right. Like you can have the
Yes.
best substance, but if they're not looking your way, like the substance is wasted. And same thing, you could have the best outfit, that killer look, and if you don't have the substance, your outfit is wasted. And so like as you guys are listening to this, I want you to really think about the importance of marrying this brand messaging with your visual brand identity and developing them in tandem because they are so crucial and they each play off of each other. And so I love that you have brought this up. Like it is so, so good. Another thing that I'm curious about as we're talking through more of this, because you talk about how the key really is not about being like one specific thing or another specific thing, but really just being consistent and kind of being yourself, right? And what are ways that through brand messaging, you are helping your clients do that? Because I know for me, and as also I am not diagnosed, but I'm fairly certain that it's there. The ADHD, I'm fairly freaking certain is there. I'm wanting to change things like all the time. So how do you help your clients who also maybe want to change things or perhaps see what their competitors are doing, like, oh, I need to do this or that? How do you help them maintain that consistency and really like get grounded in who the hell they are and how they want to show up for their people?
I'm so glad you brought this up because I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to show up in the same way every single day, but no one can do that. Like, you're going to have days where everything seems to be going wrong. And if you were to actually speak in your brand voice, which is what your internal storm is, you would probably yell at people. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to turn your humanity into a brand. I believe they're two totally separate things. And when I create my brand voices for my clients, of course, I take into account who they are and their authenticity, but it's still a curated process. And I think that's what people forget. I'm not just like taking my clients' words, transcribing it, putting it into ChatGPT and being like, you're kind, empathetic, and funny. Like, we are actually creating what their brand voice is. We're creating the sentences they're going to say and again and again. We're creating the articulation behind their differentiation. So when they go to post or they go to write a sales page or they go to pitch something at an event, they know what they're going to say because their brand actually has a voice that's independent from their internal landscape as a person.
Well, I think this is also so important for people to kind of have some of that separation from their business and brand in general. Like, it can be so exhausting. Like you talked about, like there are going to be days where shit's not going well. Right?
I don't want that to be my brand voice when I'm at my worst. Guaranteed my clients don't either.
And so to be able to separate that, and that's why, again, like working with a copywriter who can help you figure out your brand messaging is so important. So on those days where you're not feeling your best, because like you said, we're all fucking human, like we're not going to show up at 100% every day. And it's something that I even have to have constant reminders about. But you've got these guidelines that you can lean on and know, okay, even if I'm not showing up as my best today, I can be damn sure that my brand is showing up as its best today because we are two separate entities, because Lucy has helped me write, the guidelines that I need, know the words I need to use, how I need to say them. And so I think that that's just something I really want us to like sit with for a second, and people listening, because I think when we hear authenticity in branding,
What a buzzword.
I know. We hear it, right? Like we think, oh, well, that means that like the personal brand has to be like me 100% in it 100% of the time, always. And that just isn't the case. Like you can be authentic without having to like sell your soul to your business and brand.
And you can also keep stuff to yourself. Like, I think there's so much pressure to share everything in your brand, but I like to tell my clients, like, let's make sure everything's in context. Like, if you want to get on your stories and you want to talk about this horrible travel story that you had, and then you can find a way to connect it to, well, I'm an operations specialist. Let's talk about why operations really failed us at the airport. Awesome. That is content that's going to perform so well. But, if you are a professional ballet dancer and you have a very aspirational brand, like, let's talk about, like, what is that going to do for your brand? So before you try and bring something into your messaging, because yes, it's you, it's true, let's ask ourselves, how is it performing in the context of the rest of our brand ecosystem?
Well, I love the context, right? Because that is something where we can easily get overzealous, maybe is the word that I want to use.
Yeah, we like try and like make our brand encapsulate all of us. I'm like, I literally could not do that. I'm such a chaotic human. Like, I can't take all the parts and put it in my brand. People would be so confused.
Same. Where like oh my gosh, like I think about like some of the different activities. Like I grew up with a mom who ran an automotive shop, right? So like I know certain things about cars, and I'm like a competitive karaoke singer. And like I love my reptile.
Competitive karaoke singer. We need to go back to that. I'm not going to let us just gloss right through.
Yes. Oh my God, I am a hoe for a stage. Okay, let's just be real for a second. I'm a bitch who loves to sing, and I'm a hoe for a stage. And when I lived in Chicago, there was a league there that was so freaking cool. And it was like bracket system. You went through,
Knockout round, Adele, let's
right,
go. Yeah.
right. It was nuts. Like people would show up in like full on costume. There would be like choreographed numbers. It was amazing and truly so much fun. And
Forget
like,
watching sports. Why is this
right?
not televised?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I
It's
don't need
like
football. This is what I came here
I
for on this
need
planet.
competitive karaoke. This is it. But right, like it's something that is just so different from the fact that like I built an isopod
Yeah.
terrarium this weekend. You know, like
And
what?
I love both sides equally.
Exactly. And it just becomes so much so to try to shove into a brand. And I feel like we also sometimes like lose ourselves a little bit when it all becomes, at least for me, like this forward facing, almost performative element then to the business. And so I love that you're like, no, we need to find the context in which we're going to share these stories and these parts of you. And as long as they relate, like, hell yeah, throw it out there. But if not, maybe let's
Yeah.
sit with it for a second.
Yeah. And I think there's always like you can choose how much you want to put into your messaging and your messaging breathes with you. It's not this like concrete document where it's like, oh my God, I like told everyone I'm a health freak and I want to show me eating a donut. Like, it's not chains, but it's just guidelines to ask yourself, like, do I want to show this part of my life or do I want to show this part of my life? Because it's a little bit more on brand and a little bit more relevant.
Well, speaking of the guidelines, right? Like, what are some of those things that you want your clients to be thinking about or things that you include in those guidelines? I love this example that you just shared of like very health conscious brand versus posting an image of you eating a donut. And so like
Yeah.
what does that look like? Because I do this a lot with my clients visually, but I'd love to hear on that messaging side, like what are the things that you have them consider?
For sure. So everything stems from the mission statement and the one liner that kicks off every brand messaging guideline deck because there's a really big, so keeping with that example, because I think we can all relate to it, there's a big difference between like a flexible kind of health focused blog that's like, we eat healthy like 90% of the time, but like we love a good lava cake. That is a very different mission than someone who's saying, sugar is evil, you need to cut it out completely, it causes inflammation, it causes all these horrible diseases, and you're gonna die. So both companies are valid. I think, I'm not here to shame anyone's brand voice. I think there's space in a lot of saturated industries for everyone to play, and then people can just go to whichever side they resonate with. But you have to know which side you're on, because then you can make sure that your messaging, so the things you're crafting, so things I'll create for someone is like their Instagram bio, I'll create their founder story, their founder bio, the actual brand voice will craft it, some one-liners. I love creating like a bank of headlines of things they just say again and again, will articulate the problem their ideal client's facing, the solution their ideal client's facing. And then they have these things where they can ask themselves just that little micro ask before they go and pitch something on stage. They're like, what tone should I use to do this? Or how should I talk about the problem with my ideal client? Because it's very different if you're talking to someone where it's like, hey, you live a pretty healthy life, but you want to indulge and you don't really know where that percentage is, versus the person that's like, you're a biohacker, you do everything 120%, like don't mess this one up. And you can even hear the way I'm saying things, it's totally different brands. And the guidelines just tell you where you fall, so you make sure you're being consistent in everything you do.
And what do you do for clients who maybe haven't fully, and maybe you just don't work with them until they figured it out, right? But like haven't quite nailed down, okay, what is my mission? Or maybe they don't know how to articulate it in like a clear single statement. Like what are some of the ways that you help them navigate through that?
If a client has no idea what their mission statement is, I'm salivating. I love helping people when they kind of know what they want, but they don't know how to articulate it. That's my favorite time to come in. And the way I help them do it is usually it's not super sexy, but I have them do a brain dump. And I'm like, if I was on your couch and there was no time limit and I was just hostage, how would you explain all the things that you're doing to me? And I'm like, you can actually just throw up, like all the words. And then what I do is I go through and I kind of highlight or bold what looks really good to me. And I'm like, ooh, this is juicy, or this is really differentiated, or I haven't heard that before. And then from there, that's where I work my magic and turn it into one single sentence.
Yes. Well, you bring up differentiating and you've brought it up a couple of times. And I want us to really sit with it for a moment as well, because I think that especially in the online space, we can get
Yeah.
really caught up in what everyone else is doing. And so, what are some of the ways that you really either help your clients understand what makes them different or help them articulate it? Because oftentimes people are like, well, like I know that I've got X, Y, and Z and my competitors don't, but how do I share that in a way that my dream clients actually care about?
With differentiators, it's actually amazing how many people know why they're different. It's also amazing how many people shrink why they're different. So, like, I'll have clients come to me and be like, I think I'm different because of these reasons, but it's not that important. And I'm like, what do you mean it's not that important? Like, no one else is doing what you're doing in this way. Or I've never heard of this modality. Or wow, you have the fastest timeline I've ever seen. But it's like we know why we're different, but then we almost convince ourselves why it doesn't matter. Like, who would care? And I think we have to get into the mindset of anytime we do anything differently, even if it's 1% different, it matters. And you can make it matter through the way that you explain it. Because yes, if I say I have a totally different process and my questionnaire is different than the other web designer you worked with, people would be like, okay, like what? But if I actually said to them, I get so deep into the meat of who you are that your website's a reflection of you and it converts instead of just another website that looks good on paper that you could have gotten from another template. Now we're in business. Now we have like something that we're really moving into. And the rest of the brand core messaging can be around this idea of like websites that reflect who you are and sell.
And what do you feel like makes you different from other copywriters?
I love this question. So I think a fun part about being a copywriter, and I'm sure anyone who's a creative can hear will relate to this. Part of it is just my craft. So some people just relate to my tone, relate to the way I tell stories, like my kind of dry humor. But something that I do that's actually very differentiated is the way I structure my offers. So my offer suite, I always say I think I'm the fastest copywriter you'll ever meet. Sometimes I do same day turnaround times. I do VIP days. I write entire websites in one day. I have an offer where you can order things a la carte off the menu. I get it to you in 3 days. I don't do retainers. I don't do like this snooty white glove service. I'm just like, any day your copy's not working for you is a day you're leaving money on the table. So I will not be slow. And that is something I'm really open about in my business. And I work with so many businesses that are generating momentum. They're scaling to 8 figures. They don't have time to wait. They love 95% work. And they are like, you are a lifesaver because I literally got things that would take me 6 months done in 4 hours with you.
I love that. And I feel like it's something that we oftentimes, don't think too much about. Like you talked about how even if you're doing something 1% differently, that is important. And I love how easily, clearly, right? Like clearly everyone listening, Lucy knows what the fuck she's doing. She was able to just tell us so quickly how she's different. And so I really love that. I love how quick you were able to share it with us, how confidently you shared it, and that you've clearly spent time thinking about it. Do you feel like with the copywriting that your clients receive, do you notice any changes in the way that they show up in their business after working with you and getting their brand messaging and everything?
So much. I actually think I love seeing the internal changes almost as much as the money wins. I just had a client, she recently had a baby and she kind of went dark for a little bit, just, with family life, which is so normal. And then I wrote her website for her. And I swear this woman went from posting like 0 times a week to now I see her post like all the time. And they're so good. And she's telling her story and she has this renewed love of her brand because she knows who she is. That's the thing about website copy. It's not just a website. When you have website copy, you get like content ideas for the rest of your life because there's so many angles that we create. And now you can just like rinse and repeat them into content. And you show up in a way where you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much clarity in who I want to be online. And now you just want to shout it from the rooftops. So it definitely changes the way people show up. I think written communication and getting it on paper, once you start speaking that and then you have this omnipresence, it's so beautiful to watch.
Yeah, well, I love that it seems like your transformations are really similar to the transformations that I also see on the visual side.
For
right?
sure.
Like the confidence that people have, they do, like, just like you said, they start showing up way more often. It's like, wait a second, before I was barely seeing you at all. Look at you. So I love, again, like this parallel that occurs, and everyone listening, why it's so important to work with professionals to really fine tune and clarify both your, verbal, written, as well as visual brand, because we're going to help you see things that you may not be seeing. It's kind of like, Oh my gosh, what is a good example of this? I know people say the like forest through the trees kind of thing, right? Where you're like, okay, like I've got this idea, but I can't really tell, what's missing or what's there. I describe it as like you're in a dark attic, right? And you as the business owner, like you've got a single flashlight and you can focus it on, these various spots in the attic. But when you bring in another professional who's got a completely different lighting setup, they can shed light on a lot of these areas that you're not seeing. Or just like you said, Lucy, like maybe you don't think are that important. And so I think it's so, so nice to be having this conversation so that people can see that this doesn't just happen on the visual side, but happens on the copywriting side as well. Another question I have for you is this may be a spicy one. Which do you think is we're gonna fight now, Lucy?
Let's go. Let's fight.
Which do you think should come first? Brand messaging or brand visuals? Because you mentioned that a lot of people will come to you with their brand visuals already done and haven't tackled their messaging yet. So which do you think should come first?
I think in a perfect world, messaging kicks off everything. I think the perfect cadence, if you will, would be brand messaging into visual branding, into website copy, into website design. And the reason I say that is often when you create your messaging, you start to get really clear on your story, and your story for personal brands especially, but also non-personal brands. I think we forget the importance of storytelling is going to dictate if your brand is bold and unapologetic, or if it's a little bit more demure, or if it's a bit more authoritative. I was like authoritarian, that's too far. Not the word I'm going for. And then from there, when you have your messaging, you're able to articulate better to your brand designer. You're able to say, we went really hard. Our brand voice is actually like radically accepting, or whatever it is. We can throw lots of fun adjectives in there. And then your visual brand designer is able to see like, oh, okay, this brand from these words and this problem they're looking to solve and this ideal client and this differentiation, no way are we going to be able to use any pastels. And then they can kind of play off of whatever the messaging is. So, okay, are we going to fight, or do you agree?
I do agree with you. Yeah, I feel like the visual side of things, I think, is the really fun and flashy side. And so I think that people dive into it first because it sounds the most exciting and is easy to like visualize how it works. Whereas I feel like the messaging, especially when we think of it as copywriting instead of like the way that you're describing it. And so hopefully people listening will start to think differently of the brand messaging. But I feel like it's kind of this very unsexy, structured, rigid thing in people's minds. And that's not at all the case. And so I love that you brought up how important it is to get that story down first, to figure out, okay, who are we working with? And I do that a little bit with my clients, but not to the same extent that you do with yours, to actually craft the kind of language and words that they want to be using. So we're good.
We're still friends for everyone listening. But of course, the cool thing is like so many people, like I actually have people who come to me with a fully done website that are like, can you write the copy? And like, I believe if there's a will, there's a way. I'm not that rigid. I think as long as the stuff gets up, cool. Like, yes, there's a perfect process, but like who's perfect? So just get your stuff done by professionals is my parting words.
Right, exactly. You're like, if nothing else, just hire someone to help you. It doesn't matter what order.
Help. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Lucy, this has been amazing. So I want to ask you some of my favorite questions to ask guests that come on the show. And I know you're going to have good answers because you are like all in the branding space. So the first question is, what is something that you absolutely love about your brand?
I actually just did some tweaks on my brand and had my designer redo my website and rewrote the copy. So I just went through like kind of a big, 70% rebrand, we'll call it. And I am in love with my brand right now because it feels so sassy and me and almost like a little like Sabrina Carpenter arrogant in certain spots. And I'm so into it. Like it's just it's the brand voice I've always wanted to convey. And it's so special for me because I actually rebranded last year and I rebranded the wrong way. I decided to go a little bit more authority building. And it actually really tanked a lot of things in my business and I had to crawl back up from it. So I think having that darkness compared to what I have now that just feels so aligned has made me appreciate rebranding the right way.
Well, I love you bring up this like rebranding the wrong way and the right way. And I feel like us as like branding individuals, we've got a little more leeway because we do a good chunk of it ourselves. So I feel like we're able to mess up a little bit more. And thank God we are, right?
Yeah.
Like we mess up so you guys don't.
Yes,
Because
I'm
I
like,
had
my mistakes were made, and I will make sure you do not make that mistake because that was horrible.
Yes. And oh my gosh, I have done the same thing where for a while I was like, I'm just like, I know that I want to work with restaurants and cannabis businesses. And so then I built everything around like that concept, having never worked with a restaurant or cannabis business before in my life. And I learned quick. Now I've worked with some now and I loved them, but I'm like, this is too niche down. I need to adjust. But at that point, like I had to remake everything. So love that you share this. Love, love, love it. And my last question for you is if there was something that you could change about your brand, what would it be?
This is such a good question. I think there's always this part of me, like I went fully into fun world. I was like, I'm going to commit. I think I'm fun. And I'm happy with what I did, but I think there's always this part of me if I see people's sites and I see their brand and I'm like, wow, they look expensive. And I think when I look at my brand, I never bill myself as a luxury brand. I know I'm a high ticket, I'm premium, but I'm not luxury. But I think, it's always like the grass is greener and you can't be everything. So when I see these ultra luxe authority building brands where they're selling like $60,000 offers and they're holding Chanel purses, whatever it is, I'm like, okay, like there's a part of me that knows I'm fully in the fun, sassy category and like not there. So I think I wonder like, what would it be like? But of course, you have to commit. It's like, going back to the dating methodology. It's like you might have like 3 types, but are you going to have 3 husbands? Like some people might, but you might not want that life. So it's like asking yourself, like, what do you want? And sometimes you do have to make a commitment.
I get it. I feel like looking at some of these other brands that again, like I'm like, ooh, I really love this thing about what you're doing over here.
Yes.
But similar to you, like
The
I
shiny
also,
object.
yes. I'm like, ooh, but can I consistently do it? Is it consistently aligned with like what I'm trying to do? So I have truly loved this conversation so much, Lucy. How can people get in contact with you if they want to continue the conversation, if they want to book you for services, or really just continue to read all the cool shit you're writing?
Yes, no, I love chatting with people, especially like, let's not be strangers. If you listen to this full episode, like hit me up on Instagram at my right hand woman, right spelled like writing, and just come say hi. Like even if you had a really good takeaway or you wanted to talk about like maybe a follow-up question that you had after this episode, I'm always on Instagram. It's actually a problem. So go find me there. If you're someone who's like, I actually don't really want to talk to you, I just want you to write my stuff, I respect it. Head on over straight to my website, myrighthandwoman.com. Again, right spelled like writing. That's where you'll see the rebrand, you'll see the new website, and you'll have a lot of fun. I promise it'll keep you very engaged for like 10 minutes. And then I think those are my 2 main things. And I'll also put in the show notes, or I guess you'll put in the show notes. I'm like hacking your account now. I have a quiz called What is Your Brand Messaging Superpower? Really short, really fun. And people say the results are scary accurate. You get a whole diagnosis of what your superpower is, where you're probably going wrong, and what you can do to fix that. So it's really in depth. It sounds cute. It sounds BuzzFeedy, but it's really in depth.
I love it. Well, everyone, I will put that in the show notes.
I will not be hacking the account of this podcast in case there's any law enforcement listening.
All of those links will be there, everyone.